Welcome back to But This Time It's Different, the show where we unpack chaos in the markets, tech, geopolitics, one broken symbol at a time. I'm Sinead, defense economist, investor, and a woman who grew up believing that if someone really loved you, they'd buy a rug and a Blue Tiffany's box and get themselves into a shit ton of debt in doing so.
I'm Alex, a technology and finance writer, and someone recently offered a lab-grown diamond on Instagram by an algorithm that clearly thinks I'm emotionally vulnerable.
Which you are, Alex.
Ouch.
So earlier this week, we explored the dark underworld of diamond smuggling, this system powered by poverty, propped up by paperwork that is probably illegitimate, and wrapped up in romance. Today, we're going to look at the opposite problem.
Yeah, I mean, we threw around these big multi-billion-dollar numbers, but it turns out that maybe no one's actually making any fucking money doing this. So maybe the diamond industry isn't just morally bankrupt, but like actually bankrupt.
Yeah, so sales are tanking. Lab-grown gems are really starting to take over. De Beers, they cannot hold the line. And Gen Z, well, we blame them for pretty much everything, God bless them, but they would rather spend 2 months' salary on a flight, a therapist, and I totally sympathize with this, a Taylor Swift ticket.
Yes, so what happens when a century-long illusion begins to crack?
And what happens when a diamond is forever collides with Klarna? Let's get into it. So let's start with the truth that no one at Cartier wants to say out loud. The diamond industry is fucked. Sales are down, prices are down, consumer interest is like nowhere to be found.
Yeah, it couldn't happen to a nicer group of people. So De Beers, we talked a little bit
Hey,
about
De Beers paid for your education. That's pretty charitable.
made the guy who spent a lot of money on some buildings I lived in rich. They didn't then sponsor me directly, to be clear. I have taken no diamond money directly. But yes, the guy...
You do not have a blood education at Oxford.
No, I've abstracted the pain elsewhere into the chain. But anyway, so De Beers, they were the diamond cartels we talked about the other day that once dictated the global supply and for decades kept the illusion alive by restricting inventories. And the way they kind of controlled 90% of the world's diamond production was by dictating pricing through sites, which were these private, tightly controlled auctions. And the buyers essentially had no bargaining power and never negotiated. They were just happy to be invited.
Yeah, and the illusion eventually cracked. In 2001, De Beers abandoned its monopoly model under pressure from antitrust regulators and sanctions threats and, well, a few inconvenient lawsuits. Since then, their market share has dropped by a whopping 30 to 35%. So in 2023, De Beers rough diamond sales dropped by 53% year on year. So they had to cancel multiple site auctions because even their top buyers didn't want more stones. And the ones that they did sell, most were heavily discounted.
Meanwhile, Russia's Alrosa, the state-run diamond producer, which I'm sure is a tremendously ethical organization, and once controlled please don't sue us, that once controlled a third of global output, is under sanctions from the US, the UK, and the EU. But instead of reducing supply, much like the country's oil industry, they just redirected it mostly to India and China at fire sale discounts, which has flooded the market with cheap, untraceable rough diamonds, accelerating the price collapse.
Yeah, well, firstly, I don't think Alrosa from Russia are going to sue us. I think we're more likely to fall out of windows. That aside, let's talk numbers. Natural diamond prices are down between 25 to 35% since 2022. The RapNet Diamond Index, which, is the S&P 500 for diamonds, has dropped 20% in the past year alone. In some categories, like 1-carat commercial grade stones, prices are down 50%, and the resale market is brutal. A recent industry analysis found that diamonds resold within 5 years retain an average of just 30 to 40% of their original retail value. So basically, if you bought a 10 grand engagement ring in 2019, which many people did, it might fetch $3,500 today on the secondary market.
If you spend 10 grand on an engagement ring, you're a sucker.
Much more.
I know, I don't get it. Apparently this makes me a bad person. But this collapse isn't just happening because of oversupply. It's happening, as you alluded to, Sinead, because demand is disappearing. Younger buyers are asking, and this is a very good question, why am I supposed to drop 2 months' salary on something that loses value and isn't, traceable and means nothing to my life except tradition, which I do believe is very important, though. But tradition and insurance paperwork. So it's price, but it's also belief.
Speaking of belief, in the 1940s, De Beer coined a "Diamond is forever" slogan, which really became the most effective slogan in advertising history. They placed diamonds in movies, like we have all seen, funded educational materials, Alex, there you are, and even sent memos to Hollywood asking the writers to include specific engagement scenes in scripts. And it worked. I mean, I'm one of these dumb people that had no idea that I was just being sold this Hollywood dream for most of my life. But by the 1990s, over 80% of American engagement rings contained a diamond. In Japan, a market that didn't even have a diamond tradition, De Beers pushed the figure from only 5% to 77% in one generation.
Yeah. But, cultural shifts come and cultural shifts go. The diamond is forever days now feel a little bit outdated and rigid and expensive. And we are now in the age of prenups. And I discovered this recently, people soft launching their relationships on social media, which when I was young, whatever, old man shakes fist at cloud. But yeah, people don't want forever. They want flexibility.
So yeah, now we're left with this kind of collapsing price structure, and the cultural script, well, especially for people like Alex, is just not really a thing anymore. And this inventory pipeline that's full of stones that no one wants at the prices that, they were promised. So this is not just a market correction. It's what we love on this podcast, which is total narrative and market failures.
Yeah, and the problem with narrative failure is you can't just fix it with a discount or clever pricing or fucking around the market. Like, once people stop believing, the sparkle just doesn't come back. But while the natural diamond industry is dissolving into markdowns and midstream panic, it's not all bad news for lovers of luxury and romance, because something very different is happening in very clean, very bright labs just outside Shenzhen or Arkansas.
Lab-grown diamonds are no longer really this fringe commodity. They're not really novelty anymore. In fact, I think they're going to be the future of the entire industry. And the future now is scalable. So let's explain what they actually are. They're not fakes. They're not kind of rhinestones or cubic zirconias, although I honestly cannot tell the difference.
What is a cubic zirconia? What does that mean?
Cubic zirconia. It's a cheap
diamond. Saying the word again doesn't help. Like, okay.
It looks like a diamond. I mean, when you see cheap rings that look like diamonds, but they cost like $20, that's a cubic zirconia.
Okay.
Lab-grown diamonds, however, are chemically, physically, and visually, although for me it's not, not really that important, they're identical to mined diamonds. They are literally the same things.
Yeah, and there are two main ways of making them. Firstly, you have high pressure, high temperature, which essentially involves replicating the conditions of the Earth's mantle, which is you take a diamond seed, you add carbon, you add pressure of about 5 gigapascals and then heat of 1500 degrees Celsius, and then boom, carbon crystallizes around the seed into a full diamond. Method 2, chemical vapor deposition, which is the slightly sci-fi one, which is you take a carbon-rich gas like methane, heat it into plasma, and then the carbon separates out and rains down atom by atom onto a diamond seed, growing it layer by layer in a vacuum chamber.
And that is amazingly cool. If you get a chance to YouTube, definitely do. So these fully formed diamonds are created in like 6 to 10 weeks. It's kind of cool that there's a gestation period for a diamond. So you have no mine, no militia, no blood-soaked riverbeds, and the quality actually most of the time is higher than the mined diamonds. So lab-grown diamonds have fewer impurities, better color control, and can be grown to exact sizes.
It's like the labs haven't given any thought to the people in the blood diamond supply chain that they're going to make unemployed. Why is this a thing now, and why wasn't it a thing 15 years ago? I think firstly, well, almost entirely it's the tech curve. So for decades, labs could grow diamonds. Like, the idea behind doing this isn't particularly new, but the cost was astronomical and size was tiny. But in the last 8 to 10 years, because of major advances in chemical vapor deposition technology and cheaper Chinese manufacturing inputs, the cost of growing a 1 carat lab diamond has fallen from in excess of $4,000 to under $300.
If it costs a few $100s to grow something that the natural market wants to charge you like nearly 10 grand for, I mean, this is an extinction level event for the diamond industry.
Yeah, and here come the producers. So, like, there are kind of three big players here. One is China, which is the world's largest producer of lab-grown diamonds by volume. Good news for India, it's managed to keep its hand in the game. It's the polishing and export powerhouse, just as it was with natural diamonds. And then the US, you have firms like WD Lab-Grown and Diamond Foundry, which, fun fact, is backed by Leonardo DiCaprio. And yeah, then you've got startups in Israel, Singapore, and yeah, there's innovation in France. Stranger things have happened because the margins are good, the product is clean and has European values, and the consumer is ready.
Yeah, I've actually been sent several pitch decks by founders in the kind of lab-grown diamond space, and it's fascinating. So not only for jewelry, which we're obviously talking about now, but for raw input materials, which is also really interesting. But going back to the consumer market, I mean, the consumer today is different as well. So, God, I feel so old talking about these young people buying diamonds. But young buyers don't want to finance these kind of blood drenched $12,000 stones just to please someone's aunt. They want customization and sustainability and a certificate that doesn't feel like it was issued by a warlord, which again, go back and listen to our last podcast on this. But Alex, I have to throw it in here that I have seen one of your family gemstones and recently.
To be fair, oh yeah, this is my late grandmother left me an engagement ring, which it's not seen use yet. To the best of my understanding, it doesn't sit with the style of the time. But
for the record, the style is very much back in vogue and is very nice. People are choosing that style these days. But anyway, I wouldn't offload it or try and sell it just yet.
okay, that's good to know because I spent all these years, mocking it, and now you tell me that she showed great foresight.
She did. Sorry, just for the record, Alex tried to sell me this.
I did not.
Right
No,
before the show.
that is not what happened. You said to me that you knew people who would buy something like that. I did not. I did not try and sell it to you.
I'm moving swiftly into the diamond trade as of this podcast.
Absolutely, yes. But speaking of prospective diamond retailers, it's fair to say that they have read the room on this. So I'll be honest, Pandora, who I'd never heard of before this podcast, they've dropped Mine Diamonds entirely. Brilliant Earth, who I'd also not heard of before this podcast, now pushes lab grown as the default option. And like even De Beers, the original cartel, launched their own lab grown brand Lightbox. And slightly hilariously, they told people this is just for fashion. It's not the done thing to use it for your engagement. I think people will be shocked to hear that the disclaimer failed to work.
Honestly, who the hell can tell the difference? You know, the truth really is a lab grown isn't just the plan B anymore for the poor people. It's plan A. It's cheaper, cleaner. It's kind of not here to coexist with Mine Diamonds, very much here to replace them. I mean, the De Beer thing is interesting because you're not going to buy a lab grown and Mine Diamond. I mean, this is pure cannibalism that they willingly let into the room.
Yeah. I mean, after a century of controlling supply to keep prices high, they are going to get buried by a product that can be grown in a warehouse, priced dynamically, not on exclusive auctions, and sold direct to consumer with free shipping. And, the market Sinead, it's just a beautiful thing.
Well, it's also not that people stopped wanting diamonds. I feel like younger people as well just don't want the baggage that comes along with it, having to explain to people over your expensive engagement brunches whether or not your diamond was sourced ethically. And as we pointed out in our last podcast, it is impossible to tell.
Yeah. And part of the reason behind the collapse of value, people can't tell. They want something cheaper. But equally, I think there has also been a little bit of a collapse in meaning at the risk of going very strokey beard here. The new buyer isn't saying, I still want the myth, but cheaper. They're saying, we'll take a new myth, please, one that doesn't make me feel complicit. The risk of sounding desperately woke.
Yeah, and to understand why the diamond industry is really collapsing here, you have to look at what it was holding up. And you mentioned this just now, Alex, but these were not just a luxury good, they were a ritual object. This is kind of the plot device for real life, the major milestone in a young couple's life before it changes.
It was about the story. You met someone, you fell in love, you bought the ring, you proposed, and this got turned from something other than serious into a choreographed public display involving fairy lights and people hiring photographers, which is still something I don't fucking understand. It turns out I discovered the London Eye offers you an engagement package where you get the capsule and the photographer photographs, and a private one. It's there with like champagne and they photograph it. Well, presumably the element of surprise has somewhat ruined it. And B, what if they say no and you are stuck in this fucking capsule waiting for it to come down? But anyway, sorry. So anyway, I don't know if anyone's ever bought that, but that's to say the diamond, the emotional punctuation mark, like the sign, it was real and official.
I think I can. This is so funny. I think people have bought that, Alex, and I'll tell you why. Because I have personally been involved in way too many people's engagements that I have never met before and will never meet again for the rest of my life. Public engagements, I think this is a uniquely American thing, are so big. Like literally people, photographers jumping out of bushes to take that photo. And actually once I was in a restaurant sitting right next to someone that got engaged, and it was very clear that the answer was no, but that was going to be a discussion after the dinner. Yeah, we saw it everywhere in movies. The proposal just wasn't complete until The Ring came out. I mean, Alex, I know that you're a rom-com fan. Sweet Home Alabama, The Notebook, oh my God, Love Actually, Runaway Bride, happened a few times. Oh my God, even Lord of the Rings has a power ring at the center of the plot if rom-coms are not your thing. And in any case, you cannot escape that the message, very carefully curated, was love equals diamond equals forever.
Yeah, well, the difference is now that obviously marriage rates are down across the board. The US fallen more than 60% since the 1970s. The average age of first marriage is now 30 for women, 32 for men, and climbing. Yeah, more and more couples are just skipping the wedding entirely, which, as we were discussing before the show, if you're planning to either buy a house or have children, is legally somewhat unwise. You should rethink that.
So, for the people who do propose, the ring is not even an automatic part of that anymore. So only 48% of Gen Z say a diamond is essential to an engagement. And a growing number of those people want color stones. And, when I think about my friends, a lot of them, actually, I'd say more of them have color stones than diamonds, or vintage rings, or, I know many that don't have a ring at all.
And yeah, I mean, I have been informed that the most culturally iconic engagement rings in the past decade are cursed. Sinead has helpfully put together a list for me, and
this is where the economics of industries meets the Daily Mail, and I'm all about it.
Yeah, because I don't really know who all these people are. And so firstly we have Ben Affleck and J-Lo, and it says in our notes, round one, the pink diamond.
Kanye, the pink brown diamond, Alex.
I didn't know they came in pink. But yeah, Kanye and Kim with the 15-carat Lorraine Schwartz, Ariana Grande, pearl and oval diamond mashup, broken off within a year.
That was a very famous ring, actually, yes.
I think the only thing I know about Ariana Grande is the Manchester Arena Blast. Yeah. But then, so, that's the only fact about her I know. And then we have, I do know this, Princess Diana's sapphire, which was passed on to Kate Middleton. I've heard of Princess Diana, not the sapphire, to be clear. That was passed on to Kate Middleton, but it's originally chosen out of a catalogue. And yeah, it was also followed by one of the messiest royal breakups in modern memory.
Yeah. So, Alex, I'm glad that you went through this cultural education with me today. These basically are a list of engagement rings that turned into more of a foreshadowing. So these are the rings that are now kind of culturally known as being bad luck rings.
Yeah. So younger couples are doing something different. They're opting for moissanite. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Sapphires, tattoos. Please don't do that. Or nothing at all. And so yeah, the diamond moment culturally has been replaced. And I actually did think about this before we came on air. If you try and name one rom-com from the last 5 years where the whole plot builds up to the big ring moment, it's actually quite difficult to think of a good example. Now it's more two chaotic people soft launching their relationship on Instagram or in the comments section of a meme, and much hilarity and japery ensuing.
Yeah, so when the diamond industry panics about declining sales, what they're actually really mourning is the collapse of this unbelievably great Hollywood love story that we are kind of no longer living in anymore, because people are still getting engaged. They're just not buying into the whole let's spend 20 grand on a ring thing. And retailers who have built their diamond margins on 3 pillars have had to rethink their entire industry. So there's this kind of price opacity, the consumer ritual, which is kind of gone, as we said, and then controlled supply. And, lab diamonds are ultra scalable.
So pleased we're talking about economics now. So yeah, let's let's start with the margin structure. So that the traditional 1 carat natural diamond, which might cost a dealer $2,000 and retail for 6,000 to 8,000, that 3x markup worked because consumers lacked information. But now the consumer can like really easily compare, and they can now see the lab grown equivalent, which looks exactly the fucking same, going for $1,500. And there is a whole community of very helpful people on Reddit saying that, well, if you get dumped, your expensive diamond actually has much less resale value than you might think.
Why do I get a feeling, Alex, that you're just going to send this podcast to anyone that you date in your life to let them know that they're not going to be getting the 20 grand ring that they've always wanted?
The woman I marry will not be the kind of person who wants a 20 grand ring, Sinead.
Noted. So the pressure is not just on the margins for these retailers, it's also on inventory. Retailers bought heavily in 2021, 2022, when diamond prices were peaking. I don't know if you remember, but like after lockdown, everyone was getting engaged and everyone was getting married. And so retailers kind of bought into this. Now, though, natural diamond prices are down 25 to 35%. And these retailers are stuck with stock they cannot move without, I don't know, like just writing it all off. And that's why Indian polishers have asked for a 2-month pause on rough imports in late 2023. Warehouses are totally full and orders were flat. And even De Beers were quietly offering discounts to their kind of top clients.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, lab diamond costs have plummeted. So retailers can underprice mined diamonds by 60 to 70% and still protect their gross margin. So yeah, legacy jewelers now have to compete on price, which is something they really, really struggle to do and have like none of the cost advantages.
Yep. And they're responding in the only way that they know how to, or basically can. So they're offering our show favorite, the 0% financing through Klarna. They're throwing in free wedding bands. You know, they're not free, really. They're pushing ethical storytelling pretty damn hard. But none of this really changes the core economics, that the cost structure is super heavy and the demand curve is totally shifting and the margin logic is beyond broken at this stage.
So here's where we are. You know, you've had a diamond industry that's lost pricing power, cultural dominance, and customers' trust all at the same time. I mean, losing one of those would be bad. Losing all three at the same time is suboptimal.
Yeah, and the question, Alex, is not really, you know, is the industry going to survive or not? I mean, yeah, diamonds are everywhere. It's really what form it next takes.
Yeah, and lab grown is no longer a disruptor. It's the new default. And I think like one of the interesting things is that lab grown diamond companies, unlike, you know, the old cartel structure, can actually compete with each other properly. You know, they are actually incentivized to innovate, drive down the cost of what they're doing even more, offer consumers an even better deal. So it's only going to get worse for the kind of natural diamond dealers. So yeah, we should expect price normalization, I think like proper category bifurcation, and like volume to be the name of the game. And yeah, I think the natural market is really going to have to consolidate if it has any hope of surviving, which the antitrust authorities who caused De Beers all those problems are not going to like very much. And yeah, legacy players are going to have to either, you know, hoard these high-end stones and hope that they have developed a sort of secondary purpose as speculative assets. And I mean, it's a bit like vintage wine, but I think the demand for vintage wine is going to be better, to be honest, because I mean, maybe we can do an episode on like wine forgery another time, but like, you know, I think they're at least a bit more unique. But yeah, the days of like natural stones as mass luxury is clearly over.
Well, if vintage wines is the upside, then they're kind of screwed because those prices aren't doing very well at the minute either.
Yeah.
But, you know, you kind of have retail, as you said, moving towards direct to consumer with their transparent pricing. And also, let's not forget that the costs of direct to consumer are way lower. You know, they're mostly on Instagram. They don't have all these massive amounts of staff. They pretty much ship you stuff that you buy online and heavily customized. Margins, absolutely, they're going to kind of narrow, and the emotion that you get with that big moment of the proposal, that's going to be way less about the ring and probably more about that setting, which, you know, Alex, the London Eye, very, very nice.
Yeah, meaning is out, kids. Economics is back. It's about what they're worth and to whom.
So that pretty much wraps up the failing diamond industry on this episode of But This Time It's Different.
Yeah, if you like the episode, send it to someone who's still trying to resell their engagement ring or Googling pronunciation of moissanite. Again, have I got that right? Or like diamonds but ethical. Yeah.
I feel like this is most men that I know. We will be back next time with more broken narratives, and I guess at this stage, every industry that we cover is just one with really shitty margins. Until then, goodbye.
Yeah, bye.